I built a billion-dollar company by trusting no one. Not my board, not my family, not the men who guarded my life. So when my daughter ran across the marble lobby and threw her arms around a stranger I'd hired that morning, my blood went cold. She didn't hug strangers. She hadn't hugged anyone since her father left us. But she looked up at this ex-Navy SEAL with tears in her eyes and whispered 4 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my own child, my own past, and the man standing in my house. What she said next changed both our lives forever. My name is Elaine Voss, and I run a logistics empire worth $11 billion. I built it from nothing after my husband walked out when our daughter Mia was 3. I learned early that the people who smile the widest are usually the ones planning to stab you the deepest. So I trust contracts, not faces. I trust my lawyers, not my instincts. That's how I survived. The morning it all started, my head of security, a gray-haired man named Harold who'd been with me 12 years, told me my previous bodyguard had quit without notice. Someone had gotten to him. A bribe, most likely from a rival trying to get close to my company's shipping routes. I didn't have time to be scared. I had a board meeting in 3 hours and a daughter who needed a new gar by lunch. Harold brought in 3 candidates. The third one was different. His name was Daniel Reyes, 36 years old, former Navy SEAL, 8 years of service, honorable discharge after an injury that still made him limp slightly on cold mornings. Single father, 1 daughter, Ava, age 7, being raised by his mother 2 states away while he worked to save enough to bring her home properly. He didn't perform for me. He didn't flatter me. He just answered my questions plainly and looked me directly in the eye, which almost nobody does anymore. Why security work? I asked him. Because I know what it feels like to lose someone I couldn't protect, he said. I don't plan on losing anyone else. I didn't ask what he meant. I hired him on the spot, mostly because Harold vouched for him, and partly because something about his voice made the tight knot in my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. I brought him home that afternoon to meet Mia, more as protocol than anything else. She was sitting on the staircase, hugging her knees, the way she always did around new people, guarded, quiet, watching from a distance like she was cataloging threats the same way I did. I introduced Daniel. He crouched down to her eye level, which surprised me, because most adults talk down at children like they're furniture. Mia, I'm Daniel. I'm going to be around to keep you and your mom safe. She stared at him for a long moment, and then, without any warning at all, she stood up, walked down the stairs, and wrapped her small arms around his waist. I froze. Harold froze. Even Daniel looked stunned, his hands hovering in the air before he gently rested one on her back. Mia hadn't hugged a stranger in 5 years. Not since her father left. Not since the divorce lawyers and the newspapers and the whispered conversations she wasn't supposed to hear, but did anyway. She'd built walls just like mine, maybe higher because she was younger when she learned that people leave. Mia, I said carefully, do you know Daniel? She looked up at him, and her voice came out so soft, I almost missed it. You smell like my dad used to. The room went silent. Daniel's jaw tightened, and something crossed his face. Not confusion, but recognition, like a door creaking open on a memory he'd buried a long time ago. What was your dad's name, sweetheart? He asked gently. Marcus, Mia said, but he doesn't come here anymore. I watched Daniel's expression shift from careful composure to something closer to shock. He looked at me. Marcus Voss? Served with the Navy before transferring to private contract work overseas. My stomach dropped. You knew him. I served with him, Daniel said slowly, before I left the teams. We were on the same unit for 2 years. He talked about a daughter back home. Showed me pictures. He paused, choosing his next words like they weighed something heavy. He also talked about a wife who worked too much to notice he was drowning. I didn't know that wife ran Voss Logistics. I didn't put it together until right now. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. For 5 years, I had told myself, and told Mia, that her father left because he was selfish, because he couldn't handle real responsibility, because some men just aren't built for family. It was easier than the truth I'd buried, the one I never let myself examine too closely, that I had been so consumed by building an empire that I'd stopped seeing the man standing right in front of me. He didn't leave because he stopped loving her, Daniel said quietly, glancing at Mia, then lowering his voice further, so only I could hear. He left because he was ashamed. He came home from his last deployment different. Nightmares, can't sleep, can't sit in a crowded room without watching every exit. He tried to tell you. He told me he tried, more than once. And you were always on a call, always in a meeting, always somewhere else in your head, even when you were in the room. He didn't want Mia to watch him fall apart. He thought leaving quietly was protecting her. He was wrong, but he wasn't a coward, Elaine. He was a man drowning who didn't know how to ask for a rope. I hadn't cried in front of an employee in 11 years. I nearly did right there in my own foyer. This is the kind of story I never thought I'd be living, the kind you'd expect to hear on a channel called Hero Dad Stories. Not something happening in my own home, to my own daughter, wrapped around the arms of a man I'd hired that same morning. Over the following weeks, Daniel didn't just guard our house. He started showing up in ways I didn't know he needed. He taught Mia how to whistle. He sat with her during thunderstorms, because apparently she'd been terrified of them since Marcus left, and I'd never noticed, too busy assuming Harold or the nanny had it handled. He never once asked me for anything beyond his salary, and when I offered him a bonus for going above his job description, he refused it flatly. "I'm not doing this for money," he told me one evening on the porch, after Mia had gone to sleep. "I'm doing it because your daughter reminds me of Ava, and because somebody should have done this for Marcus before it was too late." 3 weeks later, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called Marcus. My hands shook dialing the number Daniel had gotten from an old service contact. Marcus picked up on the fourth ring, and his voice sounded older, tireder, like a man who'd spent half a decade waiting for a call he didn't think would come. "Elaine," he said. "Just my name. Nothing else. Mia asked about you." I told him. "She still remembers you." She never stopped. There was a long silence on the line, and then I heard him crying, quiet and broken, the sound of a man who thought he'd been forgotten and had just found out he hadn't been. It took months to rebuild anything. Therapy, for both of us, separately and eventually together for Mia's sake. Marcus started seeing a counselor for what the doctors finally diagnosed properly. PTSD he'd carried alone for years because neither of us had known how to ask the right questions. He moved back to the city, slowly, carefully, earning back trust one supervised visit at a time. Daniel stayed on as our head of security, eventually bringing Ava to live with him permanently once he'd saved enough, and the two little girls became inseparable, like they'd always been meant to find each other. I used to believe that trust was a weakness billionaires couldn't afford. I built walls around my company and around my heart, and I told myself that was strength. But watching my daughter hug a stranger who turned out to be the bridge back to her father taught me something no boardroom ever could. That the people worth trusting rarely announce themselves loudly. Sometimes they just crouch down to a child's eye level and mean it. The real fortune I built wasn't the $11 billion. It was learning at 41 years old that it's never too late to let someone back in, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do isn't standing guard with a weapon. It's staying, even when staying is hard, even when love once left and you're terrified it will again.